And welcome back to the podcast to answer your questions on addiction, recovery, and mental health by Waismann Method Treatment Center and Rapid Detox. I'm your co-host, Dwight Hurst, joined here by Claire Waismann and David Livingston, and it's the holidays. We're getting into the holiday season, particularly this is right around the USA Thanksgiving holiday for those of you listeners who live in the United States, and getting into a lot of general holidays. And it brings up some very interesting questions. And specifically a question that comes up for, I think, anybody who's trying to get healthy and work through things is, how do I keep and maintain sobriety throughout the holidays? There's a lot of specific challenges that come up at that time. And some of which are, from family and loved ones even. So it's a really good question.
I am actually getting quite a few calls of people saying, I need to get in. I need to get in before Thanksgiving. I need to get in before Christmas. I think there is such an expectation to be healthy, happy, and all the above on the holidays that I don't know how productive that is,
So are they trying to turn around their treatment and get out again before? I mean, of course, with rapid detox, they can totally do that, but
correct.
But
I think it's the expectations
right?
on themselves and how healthy and happy they will be on the holidays. So, it's again, we talked about that on the last episode. Is managing expectations. I think it's a wonderful thing that they want to actually get treatment and be healthy, so they can share wonderful moments with their family. But again, is the expectations of what I'm going to be during the holidays? How happy? How healthy? How is my life going to turn around? And the expectations of the families too. A lot of these people have not been in a gathering for the last 2 years.
With a lack of availability due to addiction, that can definitely, contribute to a separation. Do you feel like that is more an element of unrealistic expectations, or do you think denial plays a role?
I think it's a combination. And again, I think is managing both of what's possible and what's not possible. And if it doesn't, what is plan B? How much should we be expecting from getting treated, and B, from life, or meeting all the family members that we haven't in a while?
And you have to wonder too, then, on the one hand, I'm sure there's lots of family members that want their loved one to be healthy. And then there's probably some who just want the holidays to go smoothly. I mean, there's an element of both, right? Where it would be, I would feel better if my spouse, child, friend even, I'd feel so much better if they were healthy that I might put undue pressure. And it may end up being almost sometimes unintentionally selfish motivation. I want to feel better. I want us all to be fine. So let me kind of almost pretend we are.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would use the word selfish. What do you think, David?
I'm just orienting myself here. I just think it's hard to. The holidays have expectations. People want to relax and enjoy themselves. What do you do when someone's not in a good place, or they're vulnerable in a way, and how do you manage that with them? I think ultimately the goal is to get things settled in one way or another, so that kind of, so to speak, all things considered, you've kind of made the best decisions possible. And then everybody can kind of, whether, maybe somebody needs to go to treatment over the holidays, and that's hard, but, it's settled and it's considered, that's the thing that's really necessary. And even though it's not ideal, everyone might like to be together. Maybe that's the thing that is really best, and to at least settle that. And then once it's settled, even if somebody's not present at home, they can participate from afar and they can be part of it, and everyone can feel good about whatever they're doing. I think the goal is to things settled as well as possible, and and all the potential variations that what that might look like, and then so there's some semblance of some peace during that people can be and just relax, and so something like that. I know that's pretty broad and vague, but in without going in and creating specific scenarios, that would be how I think about it.
I remember the advice that I always hear with health management is people say that the holidays are a bad time to start a diet. As they say, you're going to indulge, and then you work on being healthy most of the time. And I wonder if someone I want to get serious about getting into treatment now. Is it premature? Is it better to, well, gosh, I mean, I don't say blanket advice or whatever, but is it better for some people to say, let me get through the holidays as safe as I can, and then start looking at treatment options? Am I setting myself up? Are there scenarios like that?
Dwight, I think that there's always different scenarios, but I think when we make those statements at this time in our lives where fentanyl is so predominant everywhere, and the amount of overdoses are right. Exactly unimaginable. We can't think like this anymore. Mm-hmm. Again, I've been doing this for 25 years, and there was a time where, I would tell patients, no, timing is everything. Let's see when you have less stress, when you're able to come. It has changed. The threats, the risks have changed. And I think if holidays is an excuse to get them in, or a reason, nowadays any reason is a good reason, because safety is not something you can count on, regardless of what drug you're buying. If you're buying illicit drugs, it's a Russian roulette every day.
It's a really good point. I think that's a really good point. So it's maybe better to focus on the expectation piece of saying, am I thinking I can shake free of my addiction for the holidays? I mean, in a way to stay sober in the holidays is to try to take the pressure of the holidays out of it. Is that what we're saying?
It could be.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Claire, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I think that would be more, should I stay in treatment during the holidays? Should I stay, in a safe environment? So if it is the holidays or the gathering or the expectations that is something that cannot be managed, then is what I said in the beginning. Let's look at plan B or C. Something that is not going to impose such stress to the person, mm-hmm. but in the same hand will be within a safe environment, whatever that is.
And so, it's all about that safety management, sort of regardless, and you have to take that in. What are some thoughts about the holiday traditions that involve substances? I mean, whether it's the glass of wine, or if you happen to be in a family that indulgence or having alcohol is a huge part. I mean, I've met people who have a huge alcohol table. Everybody's got to bring something, to drink. And sometimes that is a big part of a tradition that people have. Even a rite of passage. I've known people, I had friends growing up, and just people I know who's like, oh, at the holidays, the one time you take a sip of wine, that kind of a thing, even if you're young. How does that enter in, and how does that affect people?
I'm going to let David speak to that because, I think my thought process on that is very different than most in the addiction field. So, David, please.
Well, now I'm curious.
I know that's loaded.
Right? Yeah.
There's no well-being and no peace if you're out of control in any point in your life, and whether it's Christmas or any holiday or whatever it is. I don't, from my perspective, I think there's a danger in creating a rationale that isn't good for you, and there's no question that when people that are together, there can be, a feeling of wanting to celebrate, and kind of as we relax and our guard goes down, there's just a kind of a feeling of wanting to kind of be able to do what we want to do. But I don't give that much, even though that may be true. There's first of all, the damn chemicals and alcohol and substances are all overrated. They're just overrated, and they do far less than what people think. And the narrative around it is part of the problem. And so I try to sort of talk about that, because just create a different narrative that puts you at some peace. Like, oh, I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to enjoy my family. I'm going to be right. I mean, it's the people being together and feeling good with each other that really creates the holidays. And so that's what you want. And I think it's to just create a narrative that's more realistic and more true to what actually allows people to enjoy themselves and enjoy each other. And so, at any rate, that I look at it more from that perspective.
I have a question. I mean, and again, I might be fully mistaken of this question, but that is, don't people usually relapse or use alcohol or drugs because bad reasons, not good reasons, because they are not handling, unwanted feelings, and not because they're celebrating?
Probably a lot more often. And, certainly getting together with family, there's always ambivalence, even in the best families and the best relationships.
Isn't there some data around that? Like alcohol sales go up the day before Thanksgiving, like considerably.
Right.
My father used to always joke that was so people could handle their relatives. But
yeah, that's it. Because I mean, look, there's more love and hate, and that happens in families because there's nobody you have probably spent more time with and developed with and had to work more out with than you do with family members. And so there's just kind of more built into it. So like you're saying, Claire, there can, and if things aren't good or things haven't been, the air's never been cleared around problems, or sometimes even worse than all of that, it can be a really hard time. And, and the idea that I have to cope to be able to be home with my family is really hard on many, and maybe that's what you're talking about.
It's kind of an unhealthy self-narrative, even though I just made a joke about it. I think that's it's reinforced in movies, sitcoms, just the culture at large. It's kind of what we say about relationships or family in general, right? Is it's the old ball and chain, or it's the, going home to mom's, oh gosh, and yet I think there's a tremendous amount of people that if they put the energy into changing that narrative, they actually enjoy their family.
So, then the result here is that the issue is really not the substance itself, is the relationship. So that's what needs to be worked and be, concentrated on, is dealing with the issues within the relationship. So when Easter comes, or whatever the next holiday is, there will be less stress.
Absolutely. It's interesting how, once again, the as they say, the addictive behavior is more of an attempt at a solution than it is a problem in and of itself, right? And so if we address the underlying problem, it can make a huge difference. Now, I guess that doesn't mean that if I have, especially if there's opioid addiction, which, and David, I can see what you think, and Claire also, I find that lends itself to alcohol abuse after someone stops using opioids, because it's a downer and they can gravitate to it. It's socially accepted. If I am someone who is in that, situation than being around all my uncles and cousins as they're all, wasted, may not be a good idea for some people. Absolutely. Even if they're addressing those underlying problems, right?
I think if you're gonna, join a group of wasted people, I think it's bad idea any way you look at it.
Be a great idea.
But I think families will drink on holidays and again have a glass of wine or be happy and merry. Now, if you take it to the level of being wasted, I think unhealthy group for you to be with any way you look at it.
That's a good point. I mean, that's a really good point. Sometimes when we don't have a problem, we don't stop and question, do we?
Right?
Unless we have and I've known tons of people who, with their own addiction experience, will find that because they lose a job or lose a marriage or get arrested or it just gets out of control. And in treatment, I've heard people comment that, my fill in the blank family member, they drink a lot more than I do. They use pills, but now they're judging, me and they're holding it against me because I can't handle it, supposedly. And so you're right. I mean, sometimes that system is unhealthy anyway for reasons.
Right. And I think that it's really important to work that individually people come to understand what's really the right thing for them, because the system kind of does what it does and other people do what they do. It's how you take care of yourself and how you want to go through the holidays I think it's really important to think that through on your own and just get that clear inside yourself and then have some peace about it. What people really want is just to feel better and to have some peace and so to be conflicted or to be unsettled about what you're going to do tends to, one of the things that we see just as is that when people get a Vivitrol shot where you can't, that's an opioid blocker or they're on a blocker and it takes away for 30 days the potential of using, they don't have any cravings because it's settled. It's done. In their mind, they know it's off the table and they don't even think about it then. And they're much happier. So doing that on your own is harder. I think that, there's multiple ways to do that. And one of the reasons people get a Vivitrol shot is so that option is gone. So, maybe part of what you're talking about is when you're in an environment where things are kind of more open and people are more relaxed, it feels like there's more options, but there's many ways to take things off the table and be at peace. And I think when it's understood and felt, maybe most importantly felt in that way, that makes it a lot easier to go through the times. And then what other people are doing or not doing they're just, it's not so important.
I agree with David 1,000%. You don't like a certain food or a certain movie because your brother liked it or your friend liked it. I think our sense of pleasures, our limitations, our emotional makeup is very different one from the other. So we shouldn't be worried, because he drank 2 glasses of wine and he was doing fine and you drank one and somebody judged you. You should not worry about others. Worry how you're feeling about yourself. Are you putting yourself at risk? Are you drinking because you did lose your job or because you are under stress or, you had a glass of wine because you had a glass of wine? So I think somebody else should not be, where you judge yourself from, but how you feel within. What you want for yourself. What do you expect of yourself? Is this part of your goal of reaching, the things you want in life?
And that's interesting because you're discussing there something that I think comes up a lot, which is a positive outlook. And when I say positive, I guess I mean more addition, like where I'm adding good things instead of just subtracting pills or alcohol or whatever. And instead of just subtracting and focusing on that, then if I'm following your feedback, I'm adding a concern of how happy can I be and how healthy can I be? Yeah.
Correct. That is actually a opposite concept from most addiction theories, because you actually are in control of a lot of things in your life. So you can make decisions, and you can make healthy decisions, and you can make decisions that are not going to contradict, your inner feelings. Mm-hmm. So it's just learning how to cope and make, good decisions for yourself.
That's right. If you're full at the end of the meal, and somebody says, and you say, oh, you should have some dessert, but you don't want the dessert, you don't have to eat it. And if they say, oh, it's fantastic, you should have some, you say, oh, it looks great, enjoy. And you can do that with anything. And I think that we have, we do not emphasize the importance of what, this is a psychological term, of what I call hard objects, right? Like the hard part of ourselves that is settled things in ourselves that doesn't do things we don't want to do, or and there's almost a fear or a thinking at times where somehow you're going to lose a friend, or people won't like you if you don't drink or you don't do this. I've never seen it happen. I can't think of anybody I've lost as a friend because I didn't have dessert.
So far,
I'm right. So far. And listen, I get it. I get it that, people like it when people are joining in, but there's a million ways to join in. You can say, it looks fantastic. Who made it? So forth. I'm so full. Tell me how it is. You can join in a million ways. When did we become so lazy and so complacent that we're not able to, just hold ourselves, accountable to what we want to do? I think it's the way forward, and a lot of building, a good life in many ways, including, is really understanding restraint. I think probably the thing that is most undervalued and that creates more happiness and more peace for people is restraint. And it's never talked about. When people restrain themselves and do less and are at peace with what they're doing, their mind is relaxed. They feel at ease. They're not conflicted. There's so much peace and restraint. And I think that, so at any rate, that's a piece of what I think has got to sort of be talked about and sort of internalized over time.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're saying that. It reminds me of a coworker I had years ago. He used to take people through this scenario, especially when they were maybe just coming out of a detox situation and they were starting some therapy, or they were, just barely, they were trying to break free from use. And he would walk them through this scenario and say, do you think, and he said, I want you to be honest, in your heart of hearts, do you believe me if I describe this? And he described a scenario, and he would go, into it and kind of be flowery and creative about it. But basically saying that there are people out there that if you were spending time with them and you had a good time and you said, hey, do we want to take this to the next level? Let's use some drugs, or let's get, drunk. And he said, even if some of those people use intoxicants recreationally, there's a lot of people in a group that would say, that would ruin our good time. That we don't want to do that. And he said, in your heart of hearts, where are you today? And a lot of people would admit, I have a hard time believing that, but I'd like to believe it. And that was where he started to work on that,
But that they have a hard time believing.
Like when they're stuck in that pattern of using is such a big part of life. It's like, dude, really? I just thought healthy people were using and enjoying it. I thought that was health or whatever, not Not necessarily intellectually, right? But emotionally having a hard time wrapping their mind around that. And I just thought calling it out was a great way to start the conversation in some ways.
Right. And well, what's interesting is if you were to really ask somebody, it's so much of it is more the narrative of it than it is the action, the actual sip of alcohol. Most people don't even taste it, right? And the whatever happens at a certain point in time where they get a little, relaxed or this or that. Yeah, okay. There's a chemical response that happens and so forth. But it's far more subtle than people think, which is why people end up often doing a lot more, is because it is so little. And, and I think the thing to come to terms with is it's not that big a deal. And one of the things I've seen with long-term treatment of people over time is they actually come to that on their own. God, I relapsed. I went back to her and I was like, what am I doing? I don't even like this. This is why am I even doing this? Yeah. Right. So the narrative of it carried this impression that had a weight internally, but the actual experience of it begins to sort of bear out what I'm saying. And I see it constantly when people start to just where you'll see sobriety take a different hold inside them. It's like, oh, I really don't want it. And they can feel it. So, that's like you're saying, Dwight, there's a lot of things that can contribute, or, that's not necessarily the easiest place to get to. I'm saying it in a way, but I also know it's not the easiest place to get to very often.
What do you think is the starting point for people to start to get there? If Thanksgiving is next week or what, in a couple weeks, and I know that I'm not quite there yet where we're saying, what's a good place to start?
I believe it's just believing that you can control it. That's, believing that you have the power that is not bigger than you, that you can control your actions. I think the addiction world is constant telling people that they can't control it. It is beyond, their power, and I think that's crippling.
And that could be the downside of the powerlessness philosophy, right? And I know that's
what I'm trying to say.
Up, yeah.
Correct. I think, and I hear this, probably David here much more than I do, but I hear, from people we treated that, the first time, they went to a doctor after treatment and they were off for opiates and they said, no, I'm going to deal with Advil. And they walk out of there, they felt an inner strength that they didn't know they had. And it was much easier than they thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And,
right.
And I think it's just what is taught, what is pushed into people. If you read most things that just came out the last 3 months by a number of different organizations that deal with addiction, is addiction treatment should last much longer than it does, or patients are at higher risk of relapse. Maintenance drugs should be given for long-term, or patients can relapse. If you really read what these things are saying, is people should be locked up as long as you can so they don't relapse. Okay, they're not going to relapse if they're locked up, but obviously they're not going to have a life neither. Yeah. We should give them maintenance drug as long as we can so they don't relapse. How can they relapse? They're still on opioids. So the whole system is geared for people not to trust their own inner power, their own ability to be happy and healthy. I know there is not that simple, and I know there is mental health, issues that so often goes, undiagnosed or untreated, and is one of the major issues. Yeah. But there is a huge number of people that are able to make good decisions for themselves, and it's unfair to tell them they're not. It's cruel, actually.
I couldn't agree more. I think the process of getting better is always about empowerment and discovering who you are and what your abilities are, and so to kind of speak to the question that we're saying, like, one of the things I ask people a lot is, what do you want? And I can't tell you that most of the time what I hear is either I want to be happy or I don't know. And I want to be happy isn't good enough. Like, everybody wants to be happy. Okay, that's fine. But that's not a real answer in terms of putting a life together and so forth. So, but the question, you start to ask that, and when you start to, what do you want to see happen when you go home with your family? How do you want it to go? And once you begin to empower people, when they answer the question, what do you want? Well, I don't like it. Happens with my family. I always have to do this. Well, what do you want to do when you're home? Well, you love hiking. Why don't you go for a hike that day? Why don't you tell everybody you're gonna head out? Why don't you go for a hike for a couple hours? So if you've got to do a few other things, at least you got something in that you want to do. Oh, I never thought about that. I guess I could do that. Right. So you begin to which is empowerment. And because if you've got to do a bunch of things you don't want to do, and you've already been on a hike and you got the endorphins going on and you're relaxed more, you can put up with a lot more. And if and so it's like you're saying, it's all about empowerment. And then part of life is we do have to deal with some ambivalence. There is some frustration. There's things we have to put up with at times and so forth. But finding the balance is really, that's what it should be about.
And that's going to do us for today. Happy U.S. Thanksgiving and holidays in general to everybody out there who is listening, and be safe and make sure that you are reaching out. I think there's a lot of things we talked about today that can be very helpful if you or loved ones have anticipatory anxiety about the upcoming holidays. This show is a production of Waismann Method, Rapid Detox and Opioid Treatment, and is also produced by Popped Collar Productions, where you can learn more about starting your own podcast. Learn more about opioid and addiction treatment at opiates.com to learn more about the Waismann Method, or email us, info@opiates.com. You can also follow us on Twitter @opiates. The music for this episode, as all of our episodes, is the song Medical by Clean Mind Sounds. For David Livingston and Claire Waismann, I'm Dwight Hurst, and grateful to be with you all. Make sure that over the holiday season, like always, as I always say, keep asking questions, because if you ask questions, you can find answers. And when you find answers, you can find hope. Thanks again for listening.